And our guest and key presenter today is Dee Carawan. She's a native of Los Angeles. She's been practicing architecture for 30 years, specializing in residential work. Dee has had her own architectural practice since 2000, based in Ventura, California, with projects from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara and beyond. In her practice, Dee enjoys both large and small projects as each present their own interesting challenges. At any given time, she might be drawing a rambling French view home while conceiving of a smart addition to a Craftsman bungalow. A good project is one that allows Dee to solve tricky design problems, improve the architectural landscape of a neighborhood, and significantly enhance her client's quality of life. She's also co-chair of Santa Barbara AIA's Committee on the Environment and is a proponent of all-electric design and weaning our buildings off of fossil fuels. With that, I will hand it over to Dee. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Gosh, that makes me sound so much better or nicer than my own perception of myself. So that was kind of fun to hear.
We all need that, right?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I am not used to talking to myself, so this will be a stretch for me, but and this is the second time in a week that I'm speaking in front of people. I spoke in front of women in construction last Thursday night, and that was 100 people. So I've kind of had butterflies in my stomach for like about a week now. So I'm really looking forward to this being behind me. That said, I am so honored to be here today and speak about things that are important to me, and a little bit about my background. Before I get started, I would like to use this opportunity to make a little announcement and tell you a little bit about how my firm works. There's just two of us, and David, my project manager, he's not a registered architect, but he could be. We've been working together since 2000, so 23 years now. So I always tell people we're like an old married couple. And we just have learned each other's strengths and we complement each other really well. So I pretty much do design, project coordination, meeting with clients, talking to consultants, going to job sites, and he pretty much does most of the CAD, code research. We work in towns all over the place, so he's really wonderful about getting into websites, and we usually get through the various permitting very quickly. Anyway, David has 3 architects that he has been juggling over all these years, and he's had 2 of these architects for 30 years. He's had me for 23 years. Anyway, those 2 architects are retiring, and he is actively looking for a couple more architects to start working for. So if anybody out there is looking for that kind of person, I would just say to give me a call and chat with me and let me know a little bit about your firm and what you're looking for. I know David so well, so I think I'd be able to kind of see if he would be a good fit for you. And then let the word out for people that you know are, really good, solid people that need somebody good. Anyway, now that I've made that a little announcement, as I mentioned, it's just the 2 of us that juggle probably about 3 projects a year. Last year it was more like 6 or 7, which was too much, and I'm hoping to get back to streamlining things again. We're both very hands-on. We do everything, and it's been really nice to just have this very small practice that feels very personable. So my background is I grew up in Echo Park, which is a very hilly area of LA, right outside of downtown LA. We got in our cars to go anywhere. In the 60s and 70s, it was pretty gang ridden. So you kind of, to do anything, you kind of got out of the area. And then I went to college up in San Luis Obispo, which was this bucolic little town where you could leave your doors unlocked. You could ride your bike to school or errands. And it was such an amazing experience for me to live in that kind of little small urban town environment where it had a walkable downtown and things just felt accessible. And then I did my last year of school in Copenhagen, which was San Luis Obispo on a bigger scale. So everybody's riding their bikes everywhere, but they're riding their bikes to the train station, and then they're taking the trains into the city. So an amazing public transportation system. And I really fell in love with this kind of real urban experience. They have walking streets in Copenhagen that are just amazing. And it's just a beautiful, dense urban environment. And that was such a wonderful experience that after college, I went to go work in Boston, which is kind of very similar to Copenhagen, very walkable, amazing public transportation. And I worked for Graham Gunn there and was able to work on fabulous old buildings and lived in a fabulous old building and walked to work and just had a really wonderful experience. Although after 4 years, I was ready to come back to the California climate. So I tried out San Francisco, which again is a wonderful urban environment, and worked for Beverly Willis in San Francisco, which was a hoot. She's a fabulous person. And then ended up coming back down to Southern California, and I was working for RTKL in downtown LA. So for the first 10 years after college, I was working for kind of mid to large size commercial architects. And I never really felt like I never felt like I was found my thing yet. And RTKL started getting a little political. So I was just literally looking through the ads one day, and there was an ad for high-end residential estates in LA. And so I ended up working for an architect there who did, estates for the stars, and did that for 4 years. And I finally felt like I found my place doing residential. I loved working one-on-one with clients. I loved that it was their own home. I loved the scale of residential. I loved all the detailing. I loved working on traditional, and but keeping it, relevant to the way we live today. And then I worked for a second architect in LA, again doing high-end residential estates, and hit a glass ceiling. So after about 8 years of working for other architects and kind of feeling like, oh, this is what I should be doing, but I'm not getting ahead. So I went out on my own and I joined an architect in Ventura. And it was went into my own practice and did a mixture of small residential, and I occasionally still do a large project, but still residential. So I've been doing that since 2000. So I'm in this small little beach town doing residential, and I kind of found my sweet spot. So my word of mouth is all still down in Los Angeles. I still go south for work. But I did meet Paul Rupp, and he belongs to Santa Barbara AIA. And we bonded over the fact that we both worked on the East Coast, and we find ourselves in Southern California beach towns. So Paul and I have had a friendship over since 2008, 2009. And when the charrette came along for downtown Santa Barbara, he asked me to come up and join one of the teams. And there I met Ty. Ye, who was going to be president of the AIA, and he invited me to join the sustainability group, because that's what I was pushing the whole time I was on my team. So I joined Ed DeVicente as a co-chair, and that was 2.5 years ago. So I kind of have a foot in LA and a foot in Santa Barbara and work in the middle. So that's kind of my practice. And also, I did want to mention how much I enjoyed Anne's talk a month ago, and her talk on lighting and all those amazing projects she was showing, and the way she uses light depending on what the space is, and using lighting as a tool. I could have just listened to that talk forever. I don't think she showed us all the slides she had that night, so I think it'd be fabulous to have her back and finish what she started. I know I personally would love that. Anyway, I think as Ellen mentioned, now I'm kind of promoting all electric in my work. Typically, I do kind of large scale remodels, and typically the systems are being updated. They're usually at least 30 years old. They're really in need of renovation. So we're replacing the heating, we're replacing the gas water heater. And so I've been on this steep learn of trying to convince clients to go all electric. So far people have been pretty open to it. For the most part, these are people that can afford to swap out equipment and appliances, even if they're not quite ready to have lived their full life. So anyway, we are doing a booth for Earth Day this year, and I was really excited. We got some really, really amazing projects being that are going to be presenting and displaying in our booth. I think there's going to be about 8 firms displaying about 10 boards on just gorgeous all electric projects. Definitely a lot of eye candy for the public to look at. And Earth Day is April 29th and 30th. So come visit our booth. We're going to be in the Electrify Your Life section. And I'm looking forward to, and we've got really great volunteers all lined up for the booth. And I'm just looking forward to meeting the public and helping to promote it some more. So hopefully I've talked enough.
That was wonderful, Dee. Thank you so much. Oh, what an interesting journey you've had in, how you've gotten from where you started to today. One of the things, and if everyone on the call could, think of some questions they'd like to ask Dee, I'll just try to get the ball rolling by, noting that you're one of the most impressive people I know in our chapter with regards to sustainability, and really, sharing that very important message with all of us in the architecture group. And just curious, if you think back, like what were the experiences you had that got your fascination going with that, and got you so committed to all electric, and who were the people along the way that got you to realize how important that is?
It's funny. I had grandparents that grew up in New England, and they were just frugal people. And even though my grandfather did very, very well, and in fact, you would call him wealthy, they just lived a very simple life and lived light on the land. And my grandfather planted every kind of fruit tree imaginable. He was thrilled that, coming from Vermont and moving to LA in the 20s, he just delighted in the fact that LA was in this banana belt of, microclimate, and he planted everything: avocado trees, pomegranates. We had a mulberry tree that we had a tree house in. So I think I really feel I have a similar approach to life of just living light on the land and honoring nature. And then when I started college, Sim Vanderen, this was the 70s, there was the oil crisis. Sim Vanderen was the state architect, and he had a community up in Northern California that was sustainable. And I was asking my parents, so I'm 18, it's my first year of college, and I'm asking my parents, can I go live in this community for the summer? And it was basically like a commune. And, you know, this is mid 70s. And my parents were like, no way, Jose. But I just really felt this urge to, you know, take that further. How do we live light on the land? And we had that kind of education. This was the 70s. We had that education all through Cal Poly of, you know, of course you use solar. Of course you do these things. Of course you have energy efficiency. But after I graduated from college, nobody was really doing that, or at least I didn't seek out those firms. So I would say it went on the back burner for decades. And then about 4 years ago, I toured a couple of passive houses in Los Angeles that were all electric and had high performance envelopes. And it was really the second house that really resonated with me. It was in the valley. It was a super hot day. And we were in the house for at least 2 hours while we were given a tour of the house and, you know, talked all about passive houses. And it was the first time I'd really experienced something like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And not to mention, about the same time, about 4 years ago, it just became so evident that climate change was here. It wasn't some future prediction. It was like, we're living with it right now. And then I read Saul Griffith's book. Let's see, it's called Electrify, an Optimist Playbook for Our Clean Energy Future. And I saw him interviewed, and he clarified, he said, I'm not optimistic. He says, I'm optimistic that we have the technology. He says, I'm not optimistic that we're actually going to adopt it. And he's a PhD physicist from MIT. Back in the 70s, the US government started the energy department and started keeping track of how this country uses energy. So there's an amazing amount of data on, you know, what our country uses energy on. And so he dispels all the myths about, like, well, where are we going to get all this electricity, you know, when we all have EVs or we have all electric buildings. So he breaks down, you know, how we're going to make this transition and how it's entirely possible to get all of our electricity from renewables. So I would say that book was absolutely a turning point for me. One of the more fascinating pieces of information in the book is that fossil fuels take a phenomenal amount of energy to produce. So the exploration, the extraction, the refinement, the transportation, all of that takes like enormous amount of energy. If we stop doing all of those things, our country would need less energy, like 40% less energy, like a huge amount. So transitioning to all electric is not as scary as it sounds. And I really hope, I've talked to Dave Entner about doing a handout that we can have on Earth Day, like a flyer that people can pick up, and it's the fact versus fiction, because there are so many myths out there about all electric. So I'm hoping we have that really essential ingredient there on Earth Day for the public.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a tremendous resource for us to maybe share through the AIA website as well. I mean, just to start to build up some of those types of, information resources for people within our group to pay more attention to.
I agree, because I also hear all of those things from architects who are skeptical.
Mm-hmm. Right, or just need maybe a bit of a nudge, to get on the front lines within the construction industry, along with our contractor friends, to really be the people to encourage the property owners of our projects to do the right thing, as you're saying.
Absolutely, especially since if somebody's water heater goes out or their gas heater goes out, people are not going to call an architect. They're going to call their local plumber or contractor, and those people should be on board. And they're not, most of them are not right now. And even though code is requiring us in certain areas to do all electric for new construction, that is such a small percentage of our total built environment. And really retrofits are where this transition most needs to happen, because code is not requiring retrofits to be all electric.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about just preparing for maybe prepare the infrastructure or have a plan in place. And help property owners kind of develop that forward thinking that, okay, maybe I'm not replacing my water heater or my furnace right now, but when this old thing gives out, what will I replace it with, and how will I be ready for that? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm urging everybody I talk to just have a plan in place, just think about how you're going to maybe schedule these things and anticipate the cost. You're going to have to eventually replace this equipment anyway. So just be thoughtful about it. I think what Saul Griffith said is make like a few decisions really well, instead of doing a lot of things, little things that may not add up. And obviously, I think we should all do what we can, reducing plastics, for instance, but really weaning our buildings off of fossil fuels should be at the top of our list.
Yeah. Opening it up to anyone in the group with questions. I'll jump in with another one then. So Dee, what do you see as architectural and design opportunities associated with that approach to sustainability and renewable energy and all that? Where are you seeing those opportunities for design in your projects?
Well, I think one opportunity is it could be a good selling tool, marketing tool. And maybe that's not exactly what you mean by design opportunity, but when they take polls, it's a huge percentage of the population that believes climate change is an issue and we're not doing enough. I mean, I think it's in the 70%, which is huge. And so I think an opportunity would be if we as architects can become more familiar with, transitioning our buildings to be all electric and to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. I think that's a growth place, and maybe it's not a growth place right now, but I think it is going to be hopefully huge in the years to come, because these climate things that we're experiencing, whether it's storms or droughts, heat waves, rising tides, are just going to get worse.
Yeah, hear you.
And maybe that's because it's not quite so sexy, is because, you know, it really doesn't affect design. You know, swapping out a gas water heater for an all electric one, you know, there's really nothing sexy about that. It's not like you can buy a Tesla and have this fabulous thing on the road. You know, it's really something people won't see. You know, you have people over for a dinner party. It's not something you're going to show off.
They might be able to admire your induction stove though, right?
Oh, this is very exciting. So I have some new clients. I'm doing an ADU for them up in Silicon Valley. They're big tech people. And we were talking, so we're doing an all electric ADU, and I didn't have to sell them on that. It was wonderful. But they had been in a rental recently with an induction stove, and they loved it. And I was so thrilled, because it's usually true, if they can cook on one, that's what typically sells people. And I told Ellen this the other day, and I learned this from Ellen, is if you have a little portable induction burner, you can lend that to clients and let them take it for a test drive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll credit my daughter, who is very involved in fighting climate change, who turned me on to that idea. And I was just, and so yeah, as Dee said, just a one burner little appliance that you plug in, and then a frying pan and a boiling pot, and just have it in a cloth bag, and then just have it and be ready to lend it to people for a week or more at a time.
Mhm.
And that's how, for a lot of our projects, and we've found the stove is the one thing, as Dee was saying, whether your water heater or your furnace is electric or gas, nobody really knows or cares whether it is or it isn't, one way or the other. The stove, though, that is a sticking point for a lot of people. So if you can get people turned on to that, induction cooking is okay.
Mhm.
Usually the rest of it is just like little dominoes that fall along with it.
Mhm. I completely agree. Although if I'm doing a retrofit in Malibu right now, and we're doing everything all electric, except for they had an existing Wolf gas range, and she's keeping that. And, it wasn't worth the fight.
Mhm.
And I felt grateful everything else was going electric. They're doing solar, they're doing batteries, they're doing everything right. And it wasn't worth the fight to, get rid of the Wolf. It's, a fairly new appliance, and, I'm not gonna tell somebody to get rid of something that's working perfectly well.
Mhm. Amy, did you have a question for Dee?
Yeah, you kind of just touched on one of the main ones, because I do see like this gas stove being a hard one to get over, but maybe using that induction thing would get you used to it. I was curious, like if there's like specific brands that are sort of leading the way, like in the appliance arena, especially with the kind of electric in mind.
I really don't get into appliance selections with clients. I typically leave that to the interior designers, and most of my projects do have interior designers. So unfortunately not.
And then my other question that I've just been wondering about, I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but the use of kind of all these batteries now, and just long term, like how long they're going to last, and then what happens when you can't use them anymore and those start going into a landfill, or I don't know how they've been constructed so that you can take them apart and kind of reuse parts of them, but I'm curious about that trajectory and what you think might
Mhm.
transpire.
I think batteries are such a hard topic right now because there are problems with disposal. There's also problems with the countries that are producing the rare earth materials for these batteries, and they're not exactly the best places on the planet as far as labor goes. I have heard they last about 10 years. I recently did my license renewal education, the zero net energy and Imbalance did that in-house at the chapter, and it was an amazing 5-hour training. They were saying, you know, if you're going to do solar, you really should do a battery, because the utility companies really don't want all that energy going back to them. They really want you using it. They want you collecting it and using it in place. That's the ideal situation. Maureen with Brighton Solar spoke last Thursday night for the Women in Construction, and I asked her about batteries after the presentation was over. And she was saying they don't think batteries are really, you know, at a good enough place yet for them to recommend people to have batteries. She's concerned about the disposal, and she's concerned about the materials that are being used to create the batteries. So what I typically tell people is, you know, this is the leading edge battery development. And, you know, there's two sides to the conversation, and people really do need to decide for themselves. My Malibu clients are installing a battery, and that was kind of the right decision for them. My Silicon Valley clients, they're holding off, even though they have solar, they're holding off on a battery right now. So I think that's going to be our learning edge for the next decade.
Mm-hmm. So for those solar projects, I suppose you could like set it up to be ready to accept a battery, and then, you know, install one at a later date.
Absolutely. And Lucas Johnson, who's given a couple of talks to our chapter, I actually hired him to help me on my own house. I have this 1920s cottage that is so ready to be remodeled. So he's been helping me with selecting materials and how to phase things and equipment. And he said, wait 2 years before you get a electric vehicle, and get one that has the battery that can, you know, be plugged into your house, so that you know, you can charge your car during the day. And if you want to, you know, use that car as a battery for your house, you know, can make that transition.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of trying to decide whether to, you know, wait those 2 years and get a car that has that capability.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you're making. I've heard other people say that too. I mean, as we start adopting more electric cars, right, those must come with a battery. So if you're having that anyway, how to leverage that as a useful resource to your home or your business is, yeah, really good, important point there.
Yeah, it's some of these things don't have easy answers. And I think that may be why some people kind of shy away from the whole topic. That, you know, batteries are, you know, there's debate about batteries. EVs are, you know, improving all the time. You know, how long do you wait to get one? Do you wait for more chargers to be in place before you get one? I think we're going to go through a really interesting transition these next 10 years. And I think the more we can help our clients understand the pros and cons, and the more we can all share consultant resources, so that we're getting good information, I think that's going to be important.
Great. So back to early days, Dee. What got you into studying architecture in the first place? I mean, it sounds like you had a really interesting upbringing. You were mentioning your grandparents earlier and that influence in your life. What were the things that got you to study architecture?
I was one of those little kids that just knew off the bat what I wanted to do, and it never changed. We had a little cabin up at Lake Arrowhead growing up, and during the late 60s and 70s, there was a lot of development. So after dinner every night, we'd take a walk and we'd go through these houses under construction, and I just loved it. I was just, that was my favorite thing to do. My grandfather was an architectural photographer, although I never cared for the projects he photographed, which is kind of funny. But I loved his own house, and he had this Cape Cod. He was from Vermont, so he built what he knew, which was a little Cape Cod house in Echo Park. And he built it there because it was near public transportation and he could get around town. And of course, all that public transportation went away. It literally got removed. It was the red line that he built near. And he just, I don't know, he was just, like I said, he lived light on the land and was just a really, really kind of thoughtful person. He built the house I grew up in, and it was next door to his house, and it was a Sears catalog house. And my mom helped him build it as much as a 10-year-old can. I think that was in the 40s, and a company was going out of business in downtown LA. It was like they built furniture, and he bought all this veneer wood, and he cut up all this veneer wood into squares, and he did like a patchwork quilt inside the house. It was really beautiful. So it was kind of like this cozy little cabin. And he kind of so he was very well to do. He kept on collecting like little houses all over the place. So he bought the little cabin up at Arrowhead. He had one in Crestline. He bought several in our neighborhood. He just kind of loved small houses. And so anyway, you could just say it's maybe in my blood.
Fun.
Yeah.
I have more of like a business question too, since like you're kind of you have someone who's kind of working with you, but it's really primarily you. What's the best thing from that scenario, and what is the hardest thing? Sort of like the two ends.
Yeah, they both exist. It's not a perfect situation. The best part is I'm a hands-on person, and in the time it would take me to explain to somebody to do something, I can kind of do it myself. And I can get it the way I want it right off the bat. So that's the good part. I love my clients and meeting one-on-one with them. I love being at the job site, meeting with the subs and the contractor. I love all of those things, and I kind of wouldn't want to give them up. The downside is it's just me. So if things are busy, I work weekends. When things slow down, I take time off. And I have that kind of personality that I can just kind of roll with the punches. So I've just made it work over the years. And sometimes there's been some real slow periods. So, and then there's been times where I'm, working all weekend. So it's definitely not for everybody.
Mm-hmm. What were the things, you mentioned these different firms that you worked for early on in these different locations and all of that. What were the influences you picked up from those different experiences that somehow either manifested or that you said, oh, I never want to do it that way when I get to do this on my terms? So what were the highlights and the lowlights of what you experienced at these different firms before you got to doing it on your own?
Interesting question. I would almost say that the cities I lived in were more influential than the actual firms I worked for.
Mhm.
And living in places with old architecture was so inspirational for me. My first project at Graham Gund in Boston, we did an addition to a Queen Anne library that was built in the late 1800s. And it was a brick building, and doing a contemporary addition to an old Queen Anne style building. I mean, working with those, we had the drawings from the original building that were all hand drawn, really lacking in detail, but beautifully drawn. And because they had the craftspeople back there to, who didn't need to be told how to do a stacked stone wall. So I would say that was a hugely inspirational project. And then going to work for the two firms in LA that did high-end residential, and just having the time to spend on detailing everything, and just immersing yourself in just a huge set of drawings for residents. That was really kind of very changing for me. Realizing that was kind of where my comfort zone was, is residential. So, yeah.
How do you do your drawings for the projects that you're working on currently?
I always start with hand drawings, and the ADU I just did for the couple up in Silicon Valley, the design was completely by hand. Floor plans, sections, elevations, a little 3D perspective, kind of looking at the big picture. And then as soon as they signed off on that, we went into CAD drawings. And I do CAD myself. And so I typically, David will start doing the structure, and I'll be doing all the interior elevations, and I'll be doing that on CAD. But often I'll print out my CAD drawings, and then I'll do overlays and sketch by hand, and then go back to CAD. So between the two of us, we finished the project on CAD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I still, take hand sketches to my client meetings throughout, I would say, the entire project. So I'll do, hand perspectives, which tend to be pretty messy. But it's enough for them to visualize. And I'll take hand drawn interior elevations. So I'm really doing hand drawings throughout the entire project, but I absolutely love CAD as a tool, and I love the precision of it. And I love being able, David and I send the CAD drawings back and forth, and I'll do my red lines myself, because, why redline a set and send it to him if I can just do it myself?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've, for the period of time that you've had your firm, there have been these economic ups and downs. What have your experiences there been, good, bad, or otherwise?
So my first two recessions, the first one was in the early 80s, right when I got out of college. And then there was another one in the early 90s. So both times I was working for other firms, and those were incredibly painful times. I think both times I did other kinds of work to kind of, make ends meet. But they really, they woke me up to the fact that architecture can come to a standstill. And so I always said, after the recession in the early 90s, I was like, I am not going through this again. So when in 2008, when things once again came to a standstill, I had built up savings, and I literally kind of took off 3 years and traveled. And that's the wonderful thing about my relationship with David and his working for other architects is I don't have to keep him busy all the time. And if I have a slow period, he never complains. When I'm busy, he always takes care of me, but when I'm slow, it's so far been okay with him. In 2008, I had a friend who was consulting in London, so I went and stayed with him for a while. I did a remodel for him. He had a house up in Half Moon Bay that I remodeled, and he started, and we remodeled it so it would be a good house for swapping. So I started traveling with him. He would swap his house with somebody in Quebec City or Santa Fe or Yorkshire or London. So we were house. So I remodeled his house, and I was house swapping with him. And also during that slowdown, I was doing additions for friends, like kitchen remodels and adding on a dining room or creating a great room in their house. So I was just doing all these little projects, and then I would go travel. So that kept me busy like 2008 to 2011 or so, and then I got busy again. And I've been busy since. Yeah. So far I have not had a slowdown since 2008.
Right.
And actually, if I can ask you and Ellen and Amy how you guys have gotten through the recessions, I'd actually be very curious about that.
You first, Amy. And anyone else, please chime in. We'd love to hear from the rest of the group, truly.
It's actually a really good question, because we all experience these downturns.
Ellen, just to say, there's also a question in the chat box after you've done this one.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. Okay,
yeah,
Amy.
Yeah, maybe if you want to, I don't know if you want me to, I can chime in real quick. I guess I actually got very fortunate. I moved to Santa Barbara in 2007, so it was right before. And so I got a job at that time, like with Shubin and Donaldson, and was just fortunate that we were busy. And then shortly after, I started working for Mark Appleton, who we also fortunately were pretty busy. So it's interesting because I moved here in this window that you wouldn't have expected what to have happened, and ended up working for a couple architects that had a good workload to kind of sustain at least my employment. So I feel really fortunate.
And you had your firm then, Ellen, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. Started the firm in 2002. It was a partnership firm. So we were about 6 years in when 2008 hit. And interestingly, it was really basically just my partner and I who were, we didn't have other employees working with us. We were still kind of getting our feet under us. And we were doing mostly residential projects, and we had just answered an RFP at Santa Barbara City College about a year prior. And 80% of what we were working on were residential, and then there was this campus work. And it turns out that it was the campus work that sustained us for that period of time when a lot of the residential work dried up. And I just, that'll always stick with me. And having a diverse practice is something that I feel, especially now that the firm is much larger than it was back then. And I've got, really want to make sure we can keep everybody going. I have a real focus on diversity of projects so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And then back in, when I first graduated and we moved to California from the East Coast, I got my first job in early 90s, which was, as you mentioned earlier, the other downturning point. And I worked for a little teeny firm, and we did really, really interesting projects. But it was one of those moments where you say to yourself, you only need one job, you know, like so many important things in life. You know, you only need one good, you know, and the trick is to know when that one good thing comes along, and seize the opportunity that it presents in your life. I'll switch over to the chat question so that Dee, you can have a good period of time to answer it, because it's a great question. And I also want to respect everyone's time. We're coming up on 1 o'clock. So I'll read it for Yuha. She's from the Maldives. She's an interior architecture student, asking advice and tips that you would give to students during their internship. She's currently doing her internship and mostly doing CAD service drawings and concept drawings after meeting clients. How would you advise to keep a harmonious relationship between clients? Because sometimes what client asks is not the most ideal for them, and suggesting or explaining otherwise creates awkwardness.
Great question.
Great question.
Yes. So advice, tips during internship, I would just say try to get a variety of experience, types of firms, small firms, mid-sized, large firms, types of projects, and find what resonates with you and what feels right. So I would say use those early years to kind of dip in and out of different types of architecture. And the second question about keeping harmonious relationships with clients. What I typically do is, if I don't like what a client is suggesting or wants to do, I would give them a reason for why I think that might not be a good idea. And then I would say, you know, what would feel right to me, or what feels right to me, or what feels right for this type of style, or, you know, a better, you know, or what I think a good solution would be, and give them options, give them an opportunity to make a decision as opposed to telling them what to do. So giving them reasons, giving them options, and then ultimately letting them decide, because if they can take ownership over the decision, then they're usually happier with it. And I'm not a forceful person. I'm not kind of an architect with a big ego. And I do really want them to be happy with their project. They're the ones that are paying for it. They're the ones that are going to live in it. But it's my job as a professional to tell them why I think it may not be a good idea and what are some better options. So I, you know, it's for me, it's really integrity, you know, and then letting the client make a decision, for better or worse.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, well, anyone else with any last minute questions for Dee? We've got a couple other folks on the call. Just would like to welcome you. Make sure you have your opportunity. If not, oh, Michelle.
Oh, hi.
Yay.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank Dee. Thank you so much for coming today. And it's always fascinating to hear other architects' journeys, and especially other women. So I appreciate you coming and sharing with us.
Well, thank you for listening.
Of course. Sorry, I had my camera off most of the time. I didn't think you wanted to see me eating.
Cheers to that. Rosa.
I just turned my camera on as well, and Michelle took the words out of my mouth. Dee, I also don't have questions, but I also wanted to thank you for your time, and it's very inspiring to see, you know, a very different approach to your career on, you know, what other people have taken with theirs. And I really appreciate your expertise. And I really am inspired and want to change my appliances now, but I'm not ready.
Yay.
Make a plan.
I have a plan now to change my appliances. They're not quite there yet, but certainly I'm going to do it all electric moving forward.
What wonderful. I think my plan is stretching out to 2030. So I'm giving myself like 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. That was really good.
Thank you, Rosa.
Dee, I also wanted to acknowledge what you were saying about how you got involved with the AIA chapter. And just, it was a great reminder to me how important it is that we reach out to one another, either in the chapter to get more engaged, or you who are, you know, not living in Santa Barbara, but are such an active member. So thinking about Paul Rupp and Ty and the amazing, you know, effect they've had on bringing you, you know, to us today in a sense, because I think otherwise you wouldn't be here right now. So in terms of, you know, our awareness, but anyway, just a good reminder to me that we are all here to support one another and to encourage each other to be involved and to give each other encouragement along the way. So thank you for all the efforts you make to be part of this chapter, because I know there are times when those are really significant.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say this Santa Barbara chapter has been so welcoming to me. And for years, I would come up to the hard hat tours, you know, and just everybody was always so nice and helpful, you know, and sharing information during these hard hat tours. So, so when Paul and Ty kind of invited me, I was like, well, hell yes.
Love that.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to post the recording of this on our website. Tara was reminding me, and there's a way of joining an email list. So if you want to hop in the chat, you can click on that and then be notified when events like this are coming up. And other than that, thank you, everyone. I forget what's happening next month, but you'll, you know, pay attention to your email. You'll see it. It'll be an in-person one after hours, same Tuesday of the month as this. And as you all know, we sort of switch back and forth between Zoom at noon and an after hours event at someone's house or at their firm. So stay tuned, more to come. And thank you so much, Dee, for all your insights today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.